Well, with you having seen the wines start off conventional, move through organic, and then move into biodynamic, what kind of evolution have you seen in the wines themselves over that period of time?
Yeah, they really have, you know, gained layers of character that I think, and it's really hard to say this because it's hard to say this objectively because, you know, every year we're changing or moving or evolving in the vineyard as well, and maybe, you know, our perceptions of the place change, or even our ambitions change as to what we want to do. So there are all those variables there, but we are finding the wines are having a stronger, unique character. I mean, the home vineyard, for example, is on clay soils, and we're really trying to bring out that soft and sensual character of clay, tannins that really melt with time, but also have this beautiful salty minerality to it. So we first saw that come through in Chardonnay, where the acidity initially used to be quite tart, quite strong. Now that's evolved to become more salivating and salty, quite vibrant, but you know, a lot of energy to it, not tart at all. And we're starting to see that come through in the home Pinot Noir now, which is really exciting because, you know, minerality in Pinot Noirs are important. It's had ample texture and weight from the clay soils, but to see this minerality come through has been great. And, you know, with that in the winemaking, moving away from additives, where, you know, in 2000s, winemakers were adding a lot of, you know, acid or enzymes and yeast as par for the course, really. You know, to be able to stop doing that, stop add enzymes or acid or yeast or anything like that, and just see the wines stand up and be really strong wines on their own has been really, really satisfying. To do that, though, you obviously need really good fruit. So it starts with growing fruit that is ripe, has got good natural acidity, is disease-free, and that comes from vines that are healthy and strong and are able to be resilient through very challenging growing seasons that we have in North Canterbury. You know, growing anything outside is challenging. So, you know, in North Canterbury, we have frosts, we have in spring we have frosts, and then we have very strong devigorating winds in spring. We have had some, we still get some humidity, so powdery mildew pressure comes through as our main disease pressure. And then at harvest, sometimes we can get some, you know, wet weather, just the normal challenges that face vines there. So yeah, growing the grapes, they need to be very strong and resilient, but if we can get them through the growing season and produce ripe, disease-free fruit, then we're able to make wine in a very natural way. And we've found that we've been able to do that more and more. The wines have been since moving from conventional to organic to biodynamic, and the wines have got just a lovely balance that we appreciate. The ferments seem to behave calm, quite natural, very little reduction, not as much as we used to have. And yeah, all the ferments seem to go dry. All the Rieslings have become drier. Most of the Chardonnays are dry now. So yeah, we're really happy with the way they've behaved. But, you know, there's many factors that have gone in as we, I guess, know our sites better. We've been very fortunate to be working with the site since 2007. So, you know, 14 growing seasons now to just fine tune what we're doing, which is a real privilege. And we're building up a team that's been with us now for, you know, more experienced crew amongst the team. So that is massive to help us get to where we want to be, which I guess is to produce wines which are really themselves, that can, you know, show the character of these three sites as clearly as possible. And so we give wines that produce, you know, show characters from clay, limestone, or sandstone, which is the character of our three vineyards, as clearly as possible.
I was intrigued as to your take on the whole concept of Pierre de Couve. speaking of yeast, of course, I've found myself over 2 decades in the business, I've found myself often drawn to wines that have been fermented using some method of Pierre de Couve. Yours is a little bit of a variation on that. Would you mind explaining a bit about that to me?
Yeah, so as we drop all the additives out of the wines we're using, the ones you're left with, you start to look at very closely. So we're looking at certified organic fruit and vineyard-derived yeast to produce the wine. And then with some of our wines, there's a little bit of sulfur just before bottling. So they're the additives to make the wine. So I worked for Mike Weersing at Pyramid Valley from 2009 to 2012. He was very inspirational with his work with Biodynamics. He was very passionate about single vineyard wines or producing wines that were showed the character of the site. Yes. So he developed this technique using propagating yeast from his vineyard. And I was fortunate to have learned, or he showed me that process, which now he shared with a lot of people, and now a lot of winemakers around New Zealand are using. And there has been some really great research done by Auckland University into the originality of yeast moving around the country to show that yeast do exist within vineyards. So yeah, what we do there is about a week before harvest, we'll go through the vineyard, get a very clean bucket and collect around about 10 kilograms of fruit. We would also include, leaves or flowers or trunk bark, debris. And there we would macerate that, so crush it, leave it in the vineyard, and I'll leave it in the vineyard to macerate for about an hour while I might go off and get another sample. And this is also our assistant winemaker now helps with this. She's become very, very good at this propagation. And so we would leave it for an hour. Then we would drain the juice off and put them into create different replicates. So usually get sample bottles, maybe 4 of them, maybe 5, have them half full to start with, and then we'd leave them in the vineyard shed. So we wouldn't, the important thing is that the clean bucket hasn't come from the winery where, potentially yeast are living, potentially.
Yes.
And in, we don't put the vineyard starters in the winery because those winery yeasts could potentially contaminate them. We leave them in the vineyard or vineyard shed, or, we used to have a caravan in the vineyard, we put it in there kind of thing. So yeah, so that juice will stay there and we'll monitor that over about a week. But after about a week, more often than not, we would come to the starter and we're about to listen to it. We could see some activity forming, and then at that point, you're really listening for, the state of the fermentation. You can hear, Mike used to say if it was, there's a certain fizz or a certain noise it used to make, he would be happy with it. Whereas if it was popping or crackling, that wasn't quite what he wanted. And you can actually plate that under a microscope and look for Saccharomyces cerevisiae. So actually what you're looking for is a moment when Saccharomyces cerevisiae are coming through. No less of the apiculate yeasts or the spoilage yeasts. So when you've got that, that's a good starter. So by that time, it might be harvest day. That's why we're trying to do it a week before harvest. Bring the fruit into the winery. Let's say with Chardonnay, we would press the press the wine, which we do over a 5-hour press cycle. But in that first pressing, the juice that comes out of the press, we would collect 40 litres of that, put it into a keg, aerate and warm that juice, and then add the vineyard starter to that, build yeast numbers up in the keg, and then that is our yeast for that vineyard's white wine. So let's say if I took that was home Chardonnay starter, that would be for home Chardonnay. I'd have a different starter for home Pinot Noir and a different starter for Dam Steep Pinot Noir, if you get where I'm going with that.
How do you prevent perhaps a predominant yeast in the winery becoming the predominant yeast in that ferment, particularly if there had been conventional yeasts used previously in the winery?
Yeah, so by taking the sample that you've propagated from the vineyard that has built up yeast numbers, adding to that juice, and giving it a head start, that is what you are initially inoculating your vat with.
Okay.
So it is definitely possible that through the fermentation cycle there could be other yeast coming in there, but you have at least started that fermentation process with the yeast you wanted it to start with.
The terroir specific yeast of the vineyard.
Totally. And it's like those yeasts have been in the vineyard through that season.
Yeah.
So they've experienced, the conditions of the vineyard, of the season. So your other additive, you've got your organic grapes and then your yeast, both come from that place. So yeast is, brewers know this, winemakers know this, that yeast is such an important part of the process that to propagate it from the site where the wine was grown, I think gives that layer of authenticity and connection there. There is potentially some great yeasts out there that are going to give us aromatic or textural characters that some people may find preferable, but it wouldn't be from the Netherwood vineyard or the Damseed vineyard. So we just want to simplify the whole winemaking process and really just show the character of what is out in the vineyard, in our vineyards. So when you try the wine and maybe you haven't visited the place, you can get a sense of what that place is, we hope, and we can share that with you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for giving us an insight into your wines today. And I look forward to tasting your wines in the future. Thanks for joining us at Good Food Revolution.
Take care.
Bye for now.